Good morning, and thank you for joining this session on scaling your people analytics practice with Augmented Analytics. My name is Richard Doherty, and I am Senior Director for Solution Marketing at Workday, and I'm based in London in the UK. And for those of you who are not familiar with Workday, we are an enterprise cloud application provider. We provide a single solution that helps our customers plan, execute and analyze on a single platform, meaning business planning, financial planning, workforce planning, financial management, human capital management and spend management, and then finally with analytics and benchmarking wrapped around all of those solutions. I will be making forward-looking statements in this presentation, so please keep in mind that the future is uncertain and plans can change. So here's the agenda for today. I'm going to be talking about some of the increased pressures that we've noticed on people analytics functions in the last 6 months or so. We'll then do a quick state of the nation. How well are we progressing with our people analytics functions? Which skills are missing, and so on and so forth. Then we're going to zero in or focus in on 3 of what I believe to be the key challenges that people analytics leaders and teams need to overcome to be able to scale up and provide, true long-lasting value to the business. And then I will come up with what I hope is the solution to those 3 challenges, which I believe to be in large part augmented analytics. I'm going to explain what I mean by augmented analytics, explain at a high level how it works, and then give you a short demonstration of an augmented analytics app. And then we'll close off with 5 minutes for Q&A. So I really didn't want to say in this meeting, I didn't want to use the phrase the new normal. I've just said it, but I will not say it again. But clearly the world has been changing around us at an unprecedented rate, driven by the pandemic. But we've also seen the acceleration of an awful lot of trends that were already there. But the pandemic has just speeded them up. Digital transformation, for instance, has drastically speeded up or accelerated. And as this world is changing around us, it puts pressure on us personally and also on the organisations that we work for. And these pressures kind of manifest themselves, I think, in an increasing pressure on the people analytics function, because many organisations, they know that to navigate through these uncertain times, they need their people on board. It's their people that are going to help them get through these difficult times and then hopefully out the other end and back into a growth mode and back to some kind of normal. And the kind of questions that we're being asked as a people analytics function are changing. And one of the more obvious ones is about, how can you help us with our plan to return to the workplace? And that requires lots of data, lots of data reporting, analytics to help shape a plan that's going to be effective. Because even if you're headquartered in a country where perhaps in the Nordics where many offices have stayed open, there will be subsidiaries in other countries around the world where those offices have been closed for 6 months. So as you plan the return to the workplace, you need to understand worker sentiment. Are they ready to go back? How would they like to go back? You need to understand the capacity of your office buildings and various other elements of data. You need to mash all of this data together so that you can answer the questions that your business leadership are asking you about. Are we ready to go back to the workplace? How will we actually do that? Where should we start? And we've even seen some of our customers pulling in COVID-19 data from the World Health Organization and mashing that data together with their employee and their organizational data to give them true visibility on how they should phase the workforce back to the workplace. And another big question there at the moment that we're hearing a lot about is around skills. Skills are becoming this connective tissue, if you like, within an organization, and organizations are becoming more reliant on skills to become agile, to match workers to work using skills. So from a people analytics functions perspective, it's about having true visibility on the skills profile of the organization, where the gaps are, and so on and so forth. So lots of questions that need to be answered by the people analytics function. And unsurprisingly, we're seeing that the people analytics function is being thought of in strategic terms more and more often. And that's the stat, the 64% on the right hand side. So these numbers come from research which Workday sponsored, but which was done by the Human Capital Institute. And they were saying that of the respondents to the research, which was over 200 people analytics professionals, 64% of them either agreed or strongly agreed that people analytics was considered to be strategic within their organizations. And also on the far left hand side, the 82% is saying that 82% either agreed or strongly agreed that that data analytics skills were becoming crucial for the HR function. So now is the time for people analytics. But how is people analytics actually doing? It's been around for a few years now. So let's take a look again, referencing material from the Human Capital Institute. So there we can see in blue where we were back in 2017 in terms of the different levels of maturity that are shown on the x-axis, with the most immature being a foundational function, to the far right hand side being a highly advanced function. And I'll talk you through a couple of those different definitions in a minute. And then there's sort of the ambery, yellowy, browny curve there is showing where we are in 2020 in terms of the maturity of our functions. And I've got it written down here because I couldn't remember. I wouldn't be able to remember the definitions of these different levels of maturity, but foundational would mean that a people analytics function is proficient at descriptive reporting of a single source of data. Pretty basic stuff. As you move to the middle, integrated would mean that the function is proficient at evaluating comparisons and trends from multiple data sources. And then to the far right hand side, we look at highly advanced, which means being proficient at simulations and running experiments to test hypotheses that will dictate talent practices, and using external, social and internal data to fuel those analytics. So there you can see the different levels of maturity, and what we've seen in the last 4 years between 2017 and 2020 is a shift in terms of the average maturity from being, somewhere, as you can see there, somewhere between functional and building, to actually the majority, or the majority being around about integrated, so middle level of maturity. And what I suspect is that a lot of organizations will get stuck there, because moving from foundational to integrated is a smaller step than moving from integrated to highly advanced. And I think by the end of this presentation, and hopefully you will agree, that augmented analytics will be one way to help organizations shift from integrated to either advanced or highly advanced. In terms of skills needed, there are lots of gaps, and my next slide will talk about some of the skills gaps that there are within the people analytics functions within the organizations that were surveyed. But what are organizations doing to fill those skills gaps? Well, they're either 50% are upskilling the existing team, or third bar down there, 26% are finding people in other parts of the organization who've got the right skills. So, over 75% are looking to their existing employees to fill those skills gaps. So if you're in employment, that's great. Now, in terms of what are those skills gaps, well, right at the top of the pile is data security. And when I first saw that, I was a bit surprised. But then thinking about it, no, actually, it's not that surprising, given the level of sensitivity that there is around the data that we handle with people analytics. You clearly need to make sure that data is secure, and people only see the data that they should see. And then you've got sort of your typical sort of analytical capabilities around like data visualization, trend analysis, and then of course down the bottom there we have machine learning as being a skills gap. And to be honest with you, I would have thought that would have been much higher. So there are, but the important thing about this chart is to show there are lots of gaps. Pretty much all organizations will have a gap of some sort in their people analytics capabilities. Now, moving away from the challenge of skills, the other issue that organizations are facing is around data. It's having data silos. It's about integrating data perhaps within a talent cycle, so you have that holistic view of the employee. And if you've got your data spread across different systems and different databases and so on, then that's always been a challenge, and it will always be a challenge, quite frankly. So the data is also a problem. Now, I've now zeroed in on what I believe to be the 3 key challenges that are holding back organizations from scaling up their people analytics capability to serve the organization, and is also stopping them moving from that integrated to that either advanced or highly advanced level of maturity as a people analytics function. And you can see that those 3 key challenges are prioritization, data literacy, and scalability. The scalability is tightly a result of the prioritization and the data literacy. And I'll explain each of these key challenges in turn, and then we'll look at what a potential solution or part of a solution would be to rise above these challenges. So prioritization. So the issue that we have is which reports, which analytics, which metrics, what should we actually be doing? And then you can extrapolate that out to our stakeholders, the people who consume the reports, the dashboards and so on that are produced by the people analytics teams. There's a data overload. They get too many reports, they get too many benchmarks, too many dashboards. They don't know what to look at. And in fact, those reports, those dashboards, they perhaps come out every quarter, they're pretty fixed, it's always got the same metrics on it. How do they even know if they're looking at the right parts of the business, the right metrics? Perhaps there's something happening somewhere else, some other metric that they really should be looking at, but it's not included in their reports. So it's all about prioritization. How do we know we're looking at the right things? The second challenge is around data literacy. So we're pushing out these reports and metrics and so on to our stakeholders, to our end users, if you like. Are they able to interpret those reports in the format in which we send them to them? Are they able to understand what the report is telling them? Or is it just a jumble of numbers? If they can't interpret the report or the metric or the analytic, then it's a waste of time sending it to them. And what will happen is they'll see perhaps some kind of metric going up, going down, flatlining, whatever it may be, and they'll be on the phone to your business analyst, to the people in your team, saying, "Why? What does this mean? Can you provide me with more information on X, Y, and Z?" And then what that means then is, as we move around to the scalability, it means that your team are not able to spend time on more strategic initiatives in the area of people analytics. They're doing very transactional work. They're responding to incoming calls to explain what does a report mean. They're wasting too much time on activities that should to some extent be automated or shouldn't in fact be necessary, frankly, and which pulls them away from doing more strategic activities that they want to do, that the business needs them to do, but there just isn't enough time to do that. And then also as well, the production of these reports may well involve combining data from different sources, slicing and dicing the data, formatting the data, so on and so forth. So there's no time to focus on those strategic activities. So let's look at a part of the solution. Now, clearly it's not going to be the entire solution, but I do strongly believe that augmented analytics will be able to help many organizations address those 3 challenges. So first of all, what is augmented analytics? Well, basically it's a set of advanced techniques that are used on top of very large data sets to prioritize what we should be reporting on, to identify relationships between different metrics, to personalize a report to an individual user, and to also make it easier to consume that report or analytic. So how does this work? Well, you can see we've got pattern detection, graph processing, machine learning, and natural language generation. Let me take those one at a time. So the pattern recognition is looking across these millions of data points. There's no way, people or humans would be able to spot any sort of patterns in that data. It's just too difficult. There's too much data. But the algorithms are able to start spotting patterns of movement in the data. They're able to compare that perhaps between different parts of the organization to try and spot any anomalies, or compare it to historical trend data to see if there's something funny going on. We then use graph processing to try and identify relationships between different metrics. If one goes up, does the other one go up? Is that what the data is telling us? Or does one go up, the other one goes down? Again, very, very difficult to do unless you have algorithms crunching these huge volumes of data. So once we've sort of started identifying what are the important movements in the data, in the key metrics, we then start prioritizing, creating that stack of different metrics and reports that we could report on. We also start building out what we call the stories behind these metrics. So what are the drivers? What is impacting or affecting this movement in this metric? And then we use machine learning to decide which of those stories we should push, which of those metrics and stories we should push to an individual user. How are we able to do that? And again, I'm talking here about how we've done it at Workday. How are we able to do that? Well, because we have all of that HR data, that rich HR data in Workday. We understand. We know a lot about the person who's going to view the report. We understand how they use the system. We understand what kind of reports they've looked at in the past. We know what kind of job they do today. We know who they're working with. We know who's on their team, and so on and so forth. And using all of this data, we're able to prioritize which metrics and stories we should present to them. And then finally, that what I've just described there is about helping them prioritize. We are deciding which metrics, or the system is deciding which metrics they should look at. And then finally, we use natural language generation to build this story. So to explain why is that metric behaving, why do we think that metric's behaving in the way it's behaving? And we use natural language to explain it. So it's not just a number or a set of numbers on the screen. There's also text there that explains, using normal language, why we think, what explains what they're looking at and why we think it's behaving in the way it is behaving. And all of that is done automatically. It's all driven by the technology, by the underlying algorithms. So I think you can sort of understand how we've addressed the prioritization issue with the machine learning. We're addressing the data literacy challenge with the natural language generation and the stories, and we're addressing the scalability because all of this is done automatically. And the stories will hopefully cut down on all those sort of phone calls that come into your analysts where they have to explain what is it I'm looking at. And at Workday, we've just released our first implementation of an augmented analytics solution. We've called it People Analytics, and it looks at those 5 different categories of HR metrics that you can see on the left-hand side there. So let's have a quick look. I'm going to switch across to my browser. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. So here you can see we have I'm in my browser and I'm looking at Workday's People Analytics solution. This is in fact a prototype of it. So you can see that I have filters that I can apply down the left-hand side to the metrics. I can click on these different categories of variables, of metrics. So I'm looking at the hiring metrics here. Let's look at diversity and inclusion, because I know I've got some good data there. Now, the thing to remember is this dashboard is completely dynamic. The system has decided what I would be interested in looking at based upon the data movements, based upon the connections between the metrics, based upon my role. It's then presenting me with the information that it thinks I should be looking at. Totally dynamic. And when I log in a week's time or a month's time to look at this dashboard, it could be quite different if the underlying data has changed significantly. So here we have our diversity information. So here we have, what are the key trends in our diversity. We can see that gender, female proportion of the workforce has gone up by 3 percentage points in the last quarter. I can click on view, and then the system has identified what it thinks to be the linked variables which are driving that change, so sales, London, professional services. It's also showing me the historical data over time. If we also look, say, for this one here around ethnicity, what I want to show you here is you see that the text there, it's showing me the number of Black or African American employees is steadily rising. That's being generated automatically by the system using the natural language generation that I talked about a few moments ago. So, it's a very exciting area. It's very dynamic, and it's helping me as a consumer of analytics. It's advising me, if you like, this is what you should be looking at. Don't necessarily, you'll have your static dashboards as well that I can check every month, every quarter. But I think as an end user, I'm going to be logging in and looking at this dynamic dashboard way more often because it's data driven and it's going to help me identify areas of the business, perhaps, of our people strategy, whatever it may be, that I really should be looking at. And it's using the underlying data to make those suggestions to me. So very exciting area. Okay, so in the interest of time, let's go back to our slides. So I hope you found this presentation useful and interesting. It's always difficult to do these things virtually. I'd much rather be standing in a room in front of you. But, in summary, we're all on an analytics journey. And for some of you, augmented analytics may seem like a pipe dream. It may seem years away because you're just not ready for it. And that's fine. Clearly the first step is getting that people data foundation in place. You can trust your data so that you have lots of employee data, and ideally, in an ideal world, you have all of that data in the same place. Once you're confident on the data foundation, it's about delivering content to your stakeholders. So, reports, dashboards, metrics embedded in business process perhaps, and so on and so forth. Then you may want to think about, well, we'd like to actually combine data from other enterprise systems and external systems with our people data to provide a more holistic view and to give us other insights. That could be customer service data, sales data, or as I said earlier, data from organizations like the World Health Organization. At some point, you're going to need to open up your reporting to self-service. You need to be confident, of course, that the data is secure. And that's, we talked about earlier about the skills gaps, data security, one of the biggest skills gaps in people analytics organizations. So that might be an area to focus on, because until you're confident in the security, you're not going to open up your reporting to self-service. But if you were to have a HR system which has your analytics built in, then the security kind of doesn't matter because the security is already built into the system. And then, of course, we have augmented analytics, which helps us address those three challenges around prioritization, data literacy, and, of course, scalability. And ultimately, all we're trying to do here is to help people make better decisions. And I think augmented analytics is going to have an exciting role to play in helping our stakeholders, our customers, make better decisions in the future. Okay, let's open it up for Q&A.